Okay,
Eduardo, what's up?
how you doing?
I'm fabulous. I hope
Awesome.
you are the same.
I am about to have a amazing event with you. You
You ready to
so
learn about sales performance management and
I am
little
so
little
ready to.
a little survey report? Are you
Yeah, so
excited? Are you pumped up?
very excited to take some notes, and I'm very excited for the audience. Audience, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're here, as you know, to talk about sales management performance with Pete Kazanjy, the one and only, and you're in for a treat, audience. While I do my intro here, audience, you can go ahead on the chat and tell us where you're calling from. I see Dan is from Saratoga. We have Hannah from San Francisco. I am in New York, and I am a marketing manager here at Modern Sales Pros. And if you're new here, my slide's not changing. Oh, there we go. If you're new here to Modern Sales Pros, we are the world's largest and finest community for more than 35,000 members in sales
Yes.
management, leadership, operations, and enablement. Can you imagine, Pete, 35,000 sales nerds
The
together?
finest, the
I
finest.
know. And we are all about taking the road less travel and bringing you along for the journey with us. Our mission is to help you tackle tough questions and discover opportunities you might not even know exist. And we do this through vibrant live sessions like this one you're about to experience. We have an online forum. Instead, that's where the action happens. The 35,000 members go there, they ask questions, and then answer questions, and they help each other solve problems. And we have summits, and we are expanding an array of in-person events nationwide. We had a bunch of in-person events already, but I'm traveling next to San Francisco. There is Austin, there is Dallas coming up, Atlanta, Chicago, Boston. So we are coming to a city near you, audience. So make sure
Fun.
that you check our calendar. If you're not part of MSP yet, we will review your details. And if you're fit to join the community, we will send you an invitation to join us, and then you can join the full fun that we have in here. But that's enough about MSP. Let's focus on how to get the most out of this event. You'll see there is a Q&A panel right there on your right hand side. I don't know if my video is mirrored, so it's on your right hand side.
Just look for the
There's a
thing that says Q&A.
right there, and then you can send questions to Pete, and Pete will be able to answer them for you. It's not every day that you have the most famous sales leader in the world answering your question. So make sure that you ask questions in there. And also, this panel is being recorded, so you will receive a follow-up email from me later today. So keep an eye out on your inbox for an email from me with the recording, the key takeaways, and some resources that will be available for you. One
Love
thing
it.
I didn't mention about Modern Sales Pros is that we have the best partners ever. And today, this event is brought to you by our friends at Atrium. Pete is the founder of MSP, but he's also the co-founder and CRO at Atrium. He will talk a little bit more about Atrium. But Pete, I'm going to pass the mic to you right now. I see the audience here.
Sweet.
We have people from Atlanta, Phoenix, Austin. Thank you all for joining us. Pete, I'll pass the mic to you and you can start having a lot of fun here.
Thanks, Eduardo. I appreciate it. Here,
Yeah.
let me go ahead and share my screen really quick here. Hey, everybody. My name is Pete Kazanjy, and I am the founder of, as Eduardo was saying, Modern Sales Pros and also Atrium. That is the wrong deck, Pete. That's the right deck, Pete. But as Eduardo was saying, yeah, I work for Atrium. I'm one of our founders. For folks who are not familiar with Atrium, we make sales performance management software. So it's software that helps to um, automate and enhance the sales performance management motion of scaled sales organizations to help them improve the performance of their sales teams through automated accountability and performance management, what have you, which is why we think about performance quite a bit, which we're going to be talking about here today. Just a little bit of background on me, founder of Atrium, as noted previously. Prior to Atrium, I started and sold a recruiting software company called TalentBin to Monster Worldwide. And that's really where I went from being like a business generalist founder to first seller, sales manager, sales leader. When we got acquired by Monster, I think we probably had around like a 40-person sales organization or so. Wrote a book on modern sales after that called Founding Sales. So in general, just think about sales just a little bit, think about sales performance management, but really have a big passion around helping organizations just run high performance, high rigor, uh, operationally excellent, analytically excellent sales organizations, which is kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So um, this presentation, as Eduardo was noting earlier, I had the opportunity to give it at MSP Live, which was kind of fun. It was on a boat in San Francisco. Thank goodness it was a docked boat as opposed to a boat going around the harbor. That was happy hour afterwards. That was super fun. But that gave this presentation there. But essentially, what it is this presentation is like a report and synopsis on a survey on performance management that we conducted across a couple hundred sales operations leaders and sales leaders. So that's what we're going to be covering today. Kind of first, the big thing that we're going to cover is like a lot of folks kind of understand that there feels like something that there's a miss with sales management right now and sales performance. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit here, and largely the things that we have seen that is kind of creating challenges in the market right now is sales managers for the most part are struggling with driving performance in their teams for a variety of reasons. um, they struggle with limited bandwidth as relates to the time they spend being pulled onto calls with their reps. They're supposed to manage by metric in order to kind of help remediate that, but oftentimes struggle with that, and oftentimes are resistant or kind of hesitant to have hard conversations with their reps. Kind of funny that this is actually a sales flow right here, because probably one of the biggest problems that's driving this is remote sales organizations and kind of distance between managers and their reps. Um, and so I think broadly what we're seeing in the market is that organizations are well aware of the fact that they need to do a better job with rep performance management, and have, for the most part, realize that their managers are not getting it done with the current ways that they're approaching it, which is largely giving them walls of dashboards and charts and what have you in the form of like BI or sales CRM reporting and what have you. And so we're going to kind of get into this a little bit more here in this report, but that's like the large thing that we kind of the takeaway from this report was that organizations, one, they recognize that they don't have the level of performance that that they would desire in their organizations, and a big driver of that they observe is the absence of high performance sales management. And so we're going to talk about where those issues are coming from, what some of the things are that organizations are doing in order to address those, and so forth. In short, what the survey was it was a I said it was 5 minutes to complete. It probably took people mostly 10 minutes or so, but it was like a 30 question survey across these various topics. Ended up with a few hundred organizations that reported out on various topics in the survey, and then we synthesized that in a report. Importantly, the people who participated in the survey, they were folks like the people who are on this call, largely people who either CROs or VPs of RevOps. The organizations that submitted survey information ranged in size. As you can kind of see, there was some small organizations. There were also kind of mid-market sales organizations, and these are the size of the sales organization. This is not the size of the organization. This is how many sellers are in the organization. So a good mix of kind of like medium-ish, smallish, medium-ish, and then large sales organizations there. So kind of ran the gamut there, and for the most part, I split out a lot of the topics by, or a lot of the answers by sales organization size. So Some kind of headlines that kind of came out of this. I used my buddy GPT-4 to do a bunch of analysis on this and to kind of summarize things. But not surprising, about 80% of organizations noted that their quota attainment in 2023 um, needed large improvement or improvement. There weren't a lot of folks who were happy with their quota attainment there. Um, Importantly, one of the things that we saw also was that um, these organizations largely kind of perceive their managers as struggling to performance manage using kind of the existing analytical harnesses that they have in place in the form of reporting, kind of BI, et cetera. So noting that only 30% of organizations ended up rating their managers as good or very good at the ability to interpret and diagnose based on kind of performance analytics. Um, Another thing that organizations largely agree uh, needs improvement is that the amount of manager enablement. So enablement going to managers as compared to enablement going to reps. Um, about 60% of organizations assess that as less than ideal or not nearly enough there. And then this was really surprising to me, and this actually we'll break this out more substantially here later in the presentation. But around 50% of organizations aren't tracking leading indicators on quota attainment. That was like very surprising to me. I think a lot of organizations um, are starting to realize that that ends up being really important because they're doing forecasting, of course, which is like, hey, which deals are going to close this quarter or next quarter or what have you. But that's like based on a close date or based on a forecast category, and they're realizing that it's important for them to track leading indicators like meeting activity or second meetings or pipeline progression or what have you more substantially. Um, the good news is that organizations are looking to do things about this. So, 95% of organizations noted that improving performance management was either very important or important. This was something that made me very happy in seeing that. And I think that this is another presentation that I'm working on right now on what I'm calling the sales performance gap. Kind of talks about why organizations are now turning to like where the kind of like prior uh, like where the prior environment of like lackadaisical performance came from. But irrespective of where it came from, now what organizations are seeking to do is remediate that. And that's a really good thing. A little more than half said that improving manager enablement was either very important or important. So those organizations who recognize that they're not doing enough enablement for their managers think that it's important, something that they should prioritize remediating. And when it comes to how to address this, right? Like, okay, cool. 95% of organizations say that improving performance management is important. What are the mechanisms, the most important mechanisms by which they're going to do that? And probably about 90% of organizations noted that doing a better job around managers holding reps accountable was either very important or important. And I think this is a big shift from what we have seen, maybe last year or the year before, where light touch management or kind of like hands-off laissez-faire management was more the kind of like the coin of the realm. Instead, what organizations are seeking to do now is to turn more attention to hands-on management focused on driving accountability across a variety of performance topics. When it comes to the behaviors that they want to drive accountability on, uh, pipeline generation was the most popular topic there. Not surprising, insofar as a lot of organizations have remediated or have like reduce their marketing spend as a result of either kind of like financial constraints or budgetary constraints. A lot of organizations have reduced the sizes of their SDR organizations, and so what that has done is that has um, driven attention to the seller, like the frontline seller, for generating their own pipeline, which of course requires um, a focus on that and also a focus on activity. So another area where organizations are seeking to drive higher performance is on improving activity levels across their rep base. This was kind of like the second one behind pipeline generation. And then the last thing that I'll kind of note here was that as a mechanism to drive better performance and better performance management, and this is kind of related to those organizations that aren't tracking those leading indicators or historically have not been as focused on driving accountability. 70% of organizations said that doing a better job on measurement, right, data-driven management of that performance was very important. So these are some of the headlines that I thought were particularly interesting that kind of came out of the data set. I'm going to get into a little bit more of the like the more nuanced data here in a second. So this was kind of the split there around quota attainment. You can kind of see that for the most part, organizations are in that needs improvement bucket. Um, and then there's a subset of the organizations that are that have a needs large improvement here. Um, not that many organizations are like, yeah, our attainment's great or very good. What I thought was particularly interesting there was the splits that you saw in kind of sizes of organizations. The organizations that were like needing large improvement was the like the biggest area of improvement was in the 100 to 250 plus range there. And I think that's not super surprising because as organizations get larger, it ends up that like keeping your arms around those reps, making sure that they have sufficient territory to attack, and also the management around that ends up being a harder and harder nut to crack. When you get to 100 or so reps, you're talking about like 10 plus managers. So making sure that those managers are managing in a consistent way ends up being kind of a challenge there. So back to the question of how important is improving performance management. What you can kind of see here is it's about a 50-50 split between very important and just like regular important there. So it ended up being like a lot of organizations are saying like, yeah, this is actually an extremely high priority for us, which isn't super surprising given this quota attainment right here. Again, when we go and look at the set of organizations or like how that splits out based on the sizes of these organizations, again, you can kind of see that right here in that 100 to 250 rep organizations is where improving performance management, because like this was the part of the segment where it was most important. And again, this is something that we see quite a bit where as you get larger and larger, the like managing the managers and kind of providing guardrails and swim lanes for the managers. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day who previously ran sales operations at Qualtrics. He was referring to the operating rhythm at the sale, like the 150 person sales organization that he was doing operations at, or he's leading operations at. But when you get to that 50, 75, 100 reps, that's really where having facilitating a consistent sales management motion ends up being very important, because you can't just do it you can't just shoot from the hip there. And so unsurprising that this is where that was like the most important there, but again, important all across the board there. this is what we saw when it came to those individual behaviors, right? So the behaviors that we asked about was we said, hey, here are some examples of performance management tactics and behaviors here. Um, you know, Holding reps accountable, providing motivation and encouragement, doing behavioral coaching, and then doing deal inspection. The two highest priority ones there was holding reps accountable, as we talked about previously, and then also deal inspection and coaching. I think one of the things that we we've seen is, whereas maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago, where there was lots of funding in the market, lots of kind of premature promotions, lots of concerns about reps potentially getting poached by other organizations. There was a high focus on encouragement, kind of like motivation and encouragement, because you didn't want to lose quota capacity by someone, by being hands-on with a rep who that would potentially want to depart. Now, sales hiring is down 66% from its peak in 2022, and you're seeing thousands of applications for a given given sales role opening. And so management focus is pivoting back towards what have traditionally been the role of management, which is, yes, encouragement and motivation, but more importantly, are we doing the things that we need to do? Are we doing a high quantity of those things? Are we doing those? Are we doing it in an effective way? Performance management. And so that's, you can kind of see that this has become a lower priority right here. You can kind of see that like 70% are saying like, yeah, it's important or moderately important, whereas you can see that like the majority of folks are focused on things like accountability and things like deal inspection and coaching there. um, when it comes to like the actual rep, these are managerial behaviors right here. What about rep behaviors? What are the rep behaviors that we're seeking to drive performance on? Biggest ones there really were pipeline generation, really big one there, as kind of noted previously. And then also this kind of goes to the point that I was mentioning earlier around paying attention to leading indicators of quota attainment, um, pipeline movement and conversion, especially when you don't have a transactional sales motion, but instead are focused, let's say you have a 75-day sales cycle, 90-day sales cycle, 120-day sales cycle, maybe even 2-quarter long, 180-day sales cycle. Um, this quarter, like this quarter's opportunity creation may not actually close next quarter. It may close the quarter after that. And so paying attention to the amount of pipeline that's getting to stage 2 and getting to stage 3 and getting to stage 4 on a quarterly basis or even on a monthly basis, um, is an important leading indicator to that quota attainment. And so it's unsurprising that you can see that folks noting that that's actually a really important behavior that they're looking to then performance manage. And of course, everyone always is like focused on closing there, but we're seeing a rise in deal inspection, and deal inspection and rigor around that and performance managing that as well. Wonderful. So this is so those are kind of some of the aspirations, like, hey, these are the things that are important. Like, you know, obviously performance management is very important, but across all kind of, or improving performance management is very important across all categories of org. These are the managerial behaviors that are important there, and then these are the rep behaviors. Okay, well, how are organizations doing this? And this was like pretty interesting to me. So how is your organization doing that measurement of performance management? So again, this is the current tooling that organizations are using that makes them uh, that leads them to have 30% of those orgs have an opinion that their managers are good or very good at interpreting this. So take as kind of with a grain of salt, I suppose you could say. But like these are the what we would call legacy analytics tools that are being shoehorned into a performance management use case. What you can kind of see here is obviously CRM reporting um, is very broad across the board. Um, Only about it's like pretty remarkable that only around 30% or so of organizations are using business intelligence in some sort of capacity. You can obviously the Tableau is the most popular there, kind of across the board, and but Tableau, Power BI, and Looker are the ones that we end up kind of seeing there. But it still is kind of fascinating that between a third or substantially less than half of organizations are using like dedicated analytics in some sort of capacity for performance analytics. When it comes to forecasting workflow, what you can see here is, for the most part, it looks like the kings of forecasting workflow are Salesforce collaborative forecasting there, at least in the small and mid market there. Um, Google Sheets and Excel are very popular as well. What's fascinating is to see in the large organization, really it's like those Google Sheets and Excel. Clary, of course, is the most popular dedicated forecasting solution. So for submitting forecasts, for kind of marking up forecasts, et cetera, et cetera. Um, there it's the most popular non-Salesforce dedicated one, but still fascinating to see that in these large organizations, it's all like Google Sheets, Google Sheets and Excel stuff, right? Which I think anyone who's in sales operations can appreciate that and kind of chuckle at that. Um, this right here, we can see the enablement resources there, and like where we see where organizations feel that there is enough or not enough. Like, of course, across the board, we see that it's less than ideal here, but where you can really see is that, you know, in those small organizations, that's really where there isn't a lot of enablement resources being dedicated to frontline managers. Not surprising, typically enablement resources are being applied to the actual reps themselves in those scenarios. But again, across the board, there's like a broad agreement that managers aren't getting enough enablement resources to help them be better managers. um, and it's something that organizations would seek to remediate. This is something that we see quite a bit when organizations come to Atrium, is that they want to drive a better performance culture, they want to drive better accountability and have better performance management, and part of that is like through measurement, and a secondary component of that is through the manager upskilling as well. Atrium, of course, helps with automating that measurement, and both from a manager facing and also a rep facing capacity. And but but man but manager upskilling is also important as well. And then we kind of I asked about what are the actual performance management behaviors that organizations are doing, like the kind of like individual actions. And this is where I saw that leading indicator goal tracking, where like only around half of organizations were doing setting goals on and tracking progress towards leading indicators. It's something that smaller organizations have a tendency to do a better job at. Not super surprising, because those are probably more modern sales organizations. They haven't had a chance to grow much larger. And so, but like not amazing. Like, you know, I would say like, well, of course, like, 100% of organizations should be tracking leading indicators on quota attainment, like first meetings and, pipeline progression and opportunities reaching certain stages and what have you. But, around like 50% of the market is actually doing that. Um, Organizations are doing pipeline review calls. Shocking. Managers love to talk about deals. They are doing this reporting and dashboarding, but as noted earlier, not super happy with their ability of their managers to be able to consume that and manage from it. Um, One thing that I found particularly fascinating was that only about 50% of these large organizations are doing are using call recording, right? It seems to be much popular in the smaller organizations, but not in these large sales organizations. Which this really seems like a no-brainer, low-hanging fruit right there. And of course, this is a no-brainer, low-hanging fruit as well there. Um, and then lastly, oh yeah, sorry, this is like the opportunities that I thought was like the most important there was, implementing call recording and then implementing leading indicator tracking really seems like kind of like the lowest hanging fruit there. So um, cool. So like that's the kind of the summary of the report there. What my sense is like these are kind of like my biggest takeaways from this, before we can kind of break here. But 90+% of sales organizations are noting that there's an opportunity for improving their sales organization's performance management. Um, you know, being laissez-faire and hands off isn't like you know the thing that got things done in 2020 and 2021 is not the thing that's going to get things done in 2024 and 2025. And that the current way that organizations go about this through what we like to call like walls of charts, um, through their CRM reporting, their business intelligence, is not getting it done with their managers. Insofar, like it's important for them to improve performance management, but the current mechanisms by which they aspire for their managers to do so isn't really getting it done. They don't believe that it's getting it done. um, and then but at the same time they want to drive this accountability. This is obviously why when we talk to organizations and we qualify organization for Atrium, organizations are excited about the notion of software that is purely dedicated for measuring and managing the performance of these of reps, at the manager level, but also rep facing directly as well. And it's like these root causes that lead people to want to talk with us around how, and for us to share with them how the type of organization, like the scaled sales organizations that we work with, do exactly that with Atrium. So cool. So that's pretty much the topics that I wanted to cover here. I'm going to go ahead and pop into the Q&A here. And someone's asking if we can get a copy of the survey or this recording. Yes, of course we can do that, and we'll definitely send the report out afterwards. There's a question here. Someone had a question around, are quotas appropriate? And I think the interest that actually goes to the notion of tracking leading indicators, because in general, what you would ideally, the way that quotas should be set is they should be set in a bottoms up capacity by looking at the aggregate amount of work that is required in order to close a deal. And so typically what that looks like is how many customer facing meetings are required. Is your solution a 1 call close? Is it a 3 call close? Is it a 5 call close? How many different stakeholders, how many meetings, and how many decisions are typically required in order to do that? And then cross that. So that's, how much deal takes in terms of labor, and then cross that with how much activity you would expect a rep to be able to do. So if a rep is SDR fed, they can do 15 customer facing meetings in a week or 20 customer facing meetings in a week. You can then back into the math there along with the win rate and say, hey, this is an appropriate quota for that. But it all kind of derives from like what the physics of the sales motion is, which comes from the leading indicators there, like first meetings, opportunity progression, etc. Right? Um, Cool. The wonderful. Well, so I think that's everything that we wanted to cover today. As noted, what we'll go ahead and do is send this out um, after send this content out after the presentation here. But hopefully, folks got some fun takeaways from this performance manager survey. And if you're interested in learning more about how organizations use Atrium to automate that performance management, so automate that manager support, and also automate the performance management of their rep from a rep facing perspective as well, we would love to talk with you about that. So thanks everyone for joining us today. And Eduardo, is there anything else that you wanted to go ahead and cover?
That's it. I want to say thank you, Pete, for all this knowledge. I think everyone got a lot of good takeaways. I see people mentioning in the chat. Thank you, audience, for participating and for joining us today. You are the best part of MSP. And again, you will receive the recording, the report, and the slides after this event is done. So while Pete and I hang out backstage, the team at MSP will make sure that you get everything that you need from us, and you will have all this content handy when you need. Audience, I'll see you next time. Pete, thank you so much. We can go hang out backstage.
Thanks, Eduardo. Bye.
Bye bye.